David Brewster here with a new episode of Chordplay. This is the Chords of the Meters, definitely a legendary funk band, and the Meters formed in New Orleans down in Louisiana in 1965, and that's a very important year because that's the same year that James Brown released Papa's Got a Brand New Bag, which literally erupted, with funk music after that. It influenced and saturated everywhere, and the Meters, alongside groups like Sly and the Family Stone, eventually Parliament and Funkadelic, Stevie Wonder, of course, the Isley Brothers. There's a lot of really essential and important pioneers in funk, but the Meters are commonly overlooked for whatever reason. They released 8 studio albums, a handful of various compilations, 4 live albums. Definitely a great, historic, and legendary funk band, the Meters. And if we're talking about the Meters, that means we're talking about the legendary Leo Nocentelli, the guitarist for the Meters, the legendary funk pioneer for sure. And he's right up there with other essential, funk guitarists, Jimmy Nolan, Eddie Hazel, Ernie Isley, and players like that. Leo's essential, definitely very influential, and a lot of the groups that followed, James Brown, the Meters, footsteps, they really honed in on his rhythm style, which is kind of a mix of single note, parts and melodies and riffs, combined with like little chord hits and partial chords and funky scratches, lots of muting and stuff like that. An essential funk guitarist. The music and chord-based examples in this episode came from 5 Meters albums, and definitely, they released 8 in their career, so I tried to hit as many as I could. I couldn't hit all of them, unfortunately. There's only so much I can do in like 20 or 25 minutes here, but definitely some great music to be found on all of their albums, and I recommend, if you haven't really heard the Meters before, dive in. They have some great music, especially if you like funk and funky rock and stuff. Great music all over the place. Great stuff. With the opening, that's the song Look a Pie Pie from the album by the same name, the title track, and it's something like this. Something like that. So we're in G or G7 right there. And the first part's single notes. So you're doing that. And you'll notice that Leo likes adding this, minor to major third a lot in his riffs. Not all the time, but occasionally, you obviously hear that in blues a lot. But here you'll find it in funk too, in his riffs like that. So that, D to F and then D to G right there. And then you've got that minor to major third hammer on there. And then you've got this little part of G7. You're really just grabbing, that B note and that F, which is really, tasty in there. Super funky little stab. And then, and you're kind of mimicking the first part of the first riff. Then you're sliding that F sharp to G, and then back to that little part of G7. Then after that riff runs its course, it kind of turns into like a Booker T and the MGs, like Steve Cropper riff, like this. That totally reminds me of Steve Cropper right there, but you got that, and then next up's the song Here Comes the Meter Man from the first Meters album from 1968, their self-titled debut, and it's something like this. So you got this single note riff, and then it's a partial B flat right there, and then you're grabbing this part of F right there. Think of that 70s kind of chord inversion, and then go to C right there, a partial C. So it's partial chords after that single note, and then, and right there that second time you're doing that F, and then an E flat right there, part of an E flat, like that 70s inversion, and then back to that C. So you've got this 3-chord kind of tag or hit that's happening, and then, and that's the chord progression happening, and Here Comes the Meter Man. Next up's the song Tippi-Toes from the album Struttin', and actually the band Primus did a cover of this on one of their early EPs, but it's something like this. And see right there, we're heavily palm muting and muting that riff, and it's kind of a reverse role for funk, because usually in funk guitar parts you'll hear the fret hand, you know, dampening or muting the strings, right? That's usually the fret hand, you know, doing that kind of thing. But this is the reverse. The picking hand is actually muting while the fret hand's, you know, fretting those chords like that. And you can barely hear the chord, really, like the character of the chord, because it's so muted, but it is kind of hiding in there like that. So it's a really different chord approach and muting approach, you know, for a funk guitar part, but really cool. Next up's the song People Say, the opening track from the Meters album Rejuvenation. Definitely a classic Meters record for sure. It's something like this. Intense. It starts with power chords, that G, and then a D over F sharp right there. And then you hear like this partial, it's like a little part of C right there, that C and E. And then you hear this little kind of double stop bend right there. And he's grabbing that A and that F and kind of slightly bending that F to F sharp. Not quite a full half step, but just kind of a smeared bend in there. And then do that riff again. And then you hear like the riff mutate, like as it kind of unfolds. And then he starts doing, so it's the G chord, that single F bent to a single D, and then the D over F sharp. And it's important to note, like the G is just one hit, and then that D over F sharp or D is 2 hits, like that. changes again, like when the verse starts here. There's just doing the G, 5, that D, and then it's just single D, or that F rather, the G5, that F, and then single Ds right there. And then keep the other part the same. But it's a super funky track and kind of an unusual funk guitar part, but I really dig that tune and I really dig that guitar part too. It's cool, it's different. Next up's the song Africa, also from the album Rejuvenation. For you Chili Peppers fans out there, you may be shocked to realize that the Chili Peppers song Hollywood is actually not a Chili Pepper song. It's a cover of this Meters song. They changed, Africa to Hollywood, and they changed some of the lyrics, but they kept the riff like this. That G power chord, and once again that minor to major third hammer on, but this time it's just single notes like that, and then a B flat to C power chord, and do it again. To a single note riff, kind of heavily muted. So that, C to B flat. And you're kind of slight bending that B flat after you hit that G. And then immediately hop over and grab that F. And then that G, F to D right there. That's repeated a lot, and then eventually you hear that B flat F to G. Classic song, and definitely kind of a shock to the average Chili Pepper fan that doesn't realize the Meters are that influential and important. Flea loves the Meters. Next up's the song Gettin' Funkier All the Time from the album Cabbage Alley, and this is super funky, like this. So you got this single note riff, G, F sharp to E right there. And then once again, we're hitting this minor to major third kind of hammer on. So you're doing it right there in A, grabbing that partial D and then doing it again in A. And I'm kind of targeting the top part the first time and then the middle part the last time, like that. So I'm kind of hitting that, and then right there, like the middle part. So kind of separating that chord. The second time, do that A hit with the minor to major third move and then a G to A power chord. Like that. Last but not least is the song Just Kiss My Baby from the album Rejuvenation. Definitely, that's a great Meters album. And this actually features a wah. And I can't really decide if it's an actual wah pedal or maybe like a touch wah, like a Mutron or something like that, envelope filter. But it has a very distinct sound, very plucky and clucky. And I couldn't really get it to sound right with my actual wah pedal. So I'm actually using the auto wah on my V-Amp Pro right here. And it actually sounds closer to the Meters, like this. definitely has that quacky, plucky, clucky kind of sound. So we're in G once again, and I'm just hearing like the open G, like that the first note you hear. And then you've got these double stops on top. And those are kind of muted. And then you've got this really cool walk up. So it's the open G to the low E open, then the open G to that F note, the open G to that F sharp, and then the open G again to that G, and then you kind of bounce on it before you start the riff over. Actually, Chris Duarte did a great cover of this song on his first album, so check out the Meters version and then hop over and listen to Chris Duarte's because he tears it up too. That's such a cool riff. It's really simple, but great guitar parts. You know, once again, I've said this numerous times on my channel. Great guitar parts don't have to be hard to play for them to be memorable or effective, and that's very effective right there. Super funky. Good luck with that wah, because it's really plucky and clucky. You might need some kind of a duck wah or something, because that's super quacky right there, but really cool. Alright, that's going to wrap this episode of Chordplay with the Chords of the Meters. Definitely an essential, legendary, pioneering funk band that influenced literally everybody. And a lot of people actually speculate that James Brown, after he developed, you know, funk and kind of exploded with Papa's Got a Brand New Bag, he actually borrowed elements from what he heard from the Meters because it was so good, and started to kind of add that to James Brown's, you know, funk machine. But there's something about their music, you know, and they, like I mentioned earlier, they never had a super huge hit. They never had a Papa's Got a Brand New Bag or I Feel Good or any of those great, you know, classic funk songs. They never had anything like that. I think Sissy Strut charted. They had some albums that charted. Like their last album, I don't think charted. Rejuvenation didn't chart, which blows my mind. It's like, how is that not a #1 album? Because it's great. But I think it was just that timing. There was so much on the scene, they kind of pushed, you know, the Meters aside in a way, because Funkadelic and Parliament, Sly and the Family Stone, Stevie Wonder, and all these artists were super huge and popular, and the Meters just kind of suffered, you know, somewhere in the sidelines or in the charts or whatever. And I think eventually they just kind of folded, like, okay, we're not as famous as all these people that, you know, borrowed all our ideas, so we're done. And I think that's why they kind of started and stopped and started and stopped, because people were literally begging them to come back. Because everybody loves the Meters, but for whatever reason they just never found that big commercial success, which is a shame. So anyway, leave some feedback and comments, please subscribe to Night Lessons, and I'll be back before you know with more content and material. Thank you.